Let's get sweaty.
Hey guys, welcome to another Shenmue Dojo video. I hope you're all doing well. Today, I wanted to talk about something that's been probably a clamour in the Shenmue community for a little while. It's been bubbling for a couple of years, potentially, maybe slightly longer. And that is for RGG to potentially make Shenmue 4 or make a Shenmue game and venture into the Shenmue series. I'm quite interested in this avenue, quite frankly, which is why I'm making this video. And they've got a really good history of making good games for Sega, and I want to explore the potential idea of pros, cons, and what they could essentially bring to the table in this environment. Now, before I go into a little brief history of the studio, I must make a disclaimer here. I'm not a Yakuza or Like a Dragon expert. I'm not an RGG studio expert. So if I've missed anything from a research perspective or anything's misunderstood from a context perspective, I hold my hands up to that. I'm not trying to give misinformation here or anything of the sort. I'm just not an expert, and I'm more than willing to listen to people who absolutely are. So a very, 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 very short history before I go into the pros and cons here. They started out at Sega as AM11 in 98-99 before being reformed into R&D 4 in 99 and 2000. Under restructures in 2000, they were then renamed Amusement Vision, and Toshihiro Nagoshi, who worked on Shenmue, if you may remember, he helped get it out the door and basically sort of pushed it out the door because Yu Suzuki was struggling to get it finished, I guess. Headed this up and basically headed the studio up for the majority of the time until fairly recently, where he's left Sega since and been replaced. In 2005, they were rebranded New Entertainment R&D Department, and then we first saw the RGG logo on Binary Domain in 2012, and essentially they've been probably Sega's premier studio ever since, mainly focused on Like a Dragon Yakuza games, but they have sort of ventured into doing Binary Domain, and they did the Virtua Fighter Ultimate Showdown port in the Dragon engine fairly recently, which was very well received, and they also did Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania again, which was reviewed quite well and quite a fun little game. But primarily, as I say, they are the Yakuza Like a Dragon studio. That's their bread and butter. That is what they are very, very, very good at. And if you haven't checked out the Yakuza Like a Dragon series, as Shenmue fans, I would urge you to check them out. I'm not here to sit and preach that one's better than the other. They are both fantastic series and both have their place in gaming. But if you haven't checked out the Yakuza games by now, do it. They are fantastic. So, that aside, what do I think they could bring to the Shenmue series? I mean, they're going to bring wealth of experience for anything. We know they've made a ton of excellent games. And as time's gone on, they've gotten to grips with the Western market. They've gotten to grips with what people want, modern gaming sensibilities, and all the rest of it. So I want to cover some of those. The first one I want to cover is a bit of a left field one, potentially here, in that they are now using Unreal and exploring using Unreal in other games. And I'm going to pop up an article here which talks a little bit about that. So this is from Push Square. You have to excuse the random scaling on the screen here. I don't know why it's done that, but it is what it is. And they're just talking about the potential of scaling into Unreal 5 and how that could benefit them going forward. And also that the Dragon engine is, for want of a better expression, quite an old system now. It was around in 2016. We're now in 2023. So you've got essentially an engine here that is 7 years old. So it's going to be showing its age a little bit here. But because they've got experience in Unreal, that could bode well for Shenmue 4. They could even, potentially, if they could sort out any licensing issues or agreements with WiseNet, could even use the Shenmue 3 engine. It's there, it's running, and they've got a basis there, so they're not having to build things from scratch. That could really benefit them here if they were to be involved in a Shenmue game. Secondly, they do build fantastic worlds. They've got a plethora of successes here. When you think of Kamurocho and Sotenbori and other areas within the Yakuza Like a Dragon series, they're all very well put together, they're all very well built, and they all feel relatively alive, actually. And that's given some of the concessions they make, which I'm going to talk about slightly later. The worlds are well put together, they're well structured, and they work very, very well. Within that, they have, as I said, quite a good understanding of modern gaming sensibilities and mechanics and how it's evolved over time. But I personally feel that they haven't strayed too far down that modern road that Yakuza Like a Dragon feels too samey to other modern games. So they've sort of stuck true to its roots in that regard. So I would hope, if they were involved in a Shenmue game, that they could potentially do that here. Modernise it, but keep its roots, keep its things in terms of mechanics and things we like, and keep that basis there, but build on it, modernize it a little bit, and essentially bring it forward, which they've struggled to do with Shenmue 3. Let's be honest, some of the mechanics there are a little bit archaic. I didn't mind them, but I can see the criticisms there. Next, I think, is probably one of the biggest aspects here. They have an absolutely fantastic story writing team who could work with Yu Suzuki, WiseNet, fleshing out the story of Shenmue 4, potentially Shenmue 5, and anything going forward that way. What they are very, very good at is fleshing out a really good mainline story. Admittedly, the side quests are a bit kooky, a bit cheesy, a bit wacky, but they do tell very good stories within their games. And I think they build them very well. They build up to a big ending, and they flesh out the characters really fantastically. And within that, they have some good set pieces. Now, Shenmue 3 also had some excellent set pieces in there. So you can imagine if these two came together, I think you would have a really good mesh of talent there, which could give you a really good fleshed out story, with the guidance of Yu Suzuki to make sure it maintains the Shenmue feel, the Shenmue values, all those sorts of things that we know and love, without going too far into the weird, the crazy, and the wonderful. Obviously, Shenmue has magic involved, and that could well come in here, but that's within the context of the story, I guess. Next, I think fighting system. Now, it's a double-edged sword here. In terms of the Yakuza fighting system, I'm going to come onto it in a little bit and the way it is at the moment. But what I do feel within the fighting system they use at the moment, it feels really impactful. So when you hit someone, you feel it. It hurts. The impact mechanics are there. The mechanics around people falling over, getting hit, taking shots, all of that sort of thing. It looks good. It looks smooth. It looks fairly realistic. Yes, they have some of the big sort of blue, red, yellow explosions when you use power moves and things like that. And that's very much Yakuza. But on the whole, it's very well put together. Good mechanics, well animated, and quite simply, it's easy to play. Now, one benefit of RGG potentially doing this is they could have access to the Virtua Fighter Ultimate Showdown engine, which would be fantastic for Shenmue 4, because you could, in theory, drop that in, put your throw moves in, really polish in the system that's there, and you're going to have a fantastic fighting system there for a Shenmue 4, which, given Ryo's martial art, he needs to be able to do throw moves. So this could be, in theory, a good way round it. So that's sort of your plus points, I guess. Lots of them, loads and loads of them. But we also have to look at it from a different standpoint, which is some of the areas I'm probably a little bit concerned about. Not to say I couldn't get around them, but I hold a little bit of worry, I guess. So a lot of the studio's work, and I don't want to diminish RGG, their efforts, their talent, or anything like that, because that would be unfair. But what I do think and see here is they reuse a ton of assets. And it keeps costs down. It makes sense from a production point of view, because you can do things faster, quicker, you can refine. It makes sense. But with Shenmue 4, they are going to have to make whole new areas. So how used to that sort of thing are they? Do they have the talent in the team to do it? Now, I would suspect they do, but then it comes into a cost prohibitive there. Is that going to be cost prohibitive to Shenmue 4? Now, on the flip side, as I said, with Unreal, they have experience there. So if they use the 3 engine, potentially, they could avoid some of that cost. And that would be probably a really good compromise, I guess, that they're using that engine, but building within that engine, which they've already had experience with. And if they're pairing WiseNet, you could essentially negate that. NPCs and, I guess, the way they interact. Shenmue is all about a really immersive world where every NPC can be spoken to, every NPC is part of the game essentially, and you can interact with them and it feels part of the world. Yakuza, Like a Dragon, RGG, their methodology is around mostly text-based apart from major cutscenes. I understand it, it saves cost, it saves time, I get it. But could that have an impact on Shenmue's world feel? That's what I would worry about. It's not to say they couldn't do it, but they'd have to balance it with the sacrificing of the world of Shenmue, and would it really impact it to that point? As I've also come on to, the positive of Yakuza Like a Dragon is the fighting system, but I would argue that any of the fighting systems in any of those games are not as in-depth as any of the Shenmue ones, including Shenmue 3. Personal opinion, I'm probably going to get shot for that. But when you think about it, Shenmue, especially Shenmue 1 and 2, is all about learning moves, timing, getting your gaps, and all the rest of it. Yakuza, you can button mash, and it can be quite simplistic. They have some really awesome moves in it, but it's essentially a button masher that anybody can pick up and go with. And I appreciate that from a playability standpoint, but I wouldn't want to lose that depth of combat that Shenmue has, because it's part of Ryo's journey, is understanding him as a martial artist, developing him as a martial artist, and becoming better, essentially. I don't think a button masher in the Yakuza Like a Dragon style would potentially work. As I said, if they use the VF engine, that might well change that completely. Now, the last point I'm going to make here is probably the biggest point of the lot, is that there is a risk with this that Shenmue becomes Yakuza Like a Dragon Light, which is the worst thing that can happen to Shenmue ever. Now, it's not because I don't like Yakuza Like a Dragon. I really like those games. But Shenmue gets leveled quite a lot in modern gaming media as essentially a shit Yakuza. While if they then Yakuzafy it too little, and it's Yakuza Light, it's going to get hammered even more for essentially copying the Yakuza model, but not going far enough with it. So they have a balancing act here in terms of maintaining the Shenmue world feel, etc., and all the good things that it does well in terms of world building, character development, the story, the fighting, and really bringing that together with modern sensibilities, but not going into too much of a Yakuza type feel. I liken them to cousins. They're from the same family, but have branched off into completely different directions here. And I wouldn't want them to essentially merge into one, because I don't think that's going to benefit anybody between, certainly in the Shenmue community anyway. I don't think it'd hit Like a Dragon Yakuza so much, because it's quite a well-established franchise that's sold quite well. I don't want things shoehorned. It's like random fights in Yakuza Like a Dragon. It happens all the time. That is not Shenmue. There needs to be elements of fighting in Shenmue, absolutely. And I think it would appeal more that there's more fighting within it. But as I said, I think on a podcast that James and I did not too long ago, I would like that option to be there to players through tournaments, through special events, that players can choose to go into. So there's more of them. So the dojo system in Shenmue 3 is a fantastic way of essentially doing that. You can optionally use that. Have more of that in Shenmue 4. Have more of those options to go and have those fights, but make it obvious to the player. So it's when you talk to NPCs, you could have a tree that says like fighting, gambling, etc. Very much like Shenmue 2 does. And you can choose fighting. They say, oh, there's a fighting arena here. You can earn lots of money. They could do that here. And then you have the option of the random fighting that's in the Yakuza Like a Dragon series without it being essentially forced down your throat. And I think that would balance that need for fights and impact and reward with the Shenmue world and environment, and it's just something that I feel quite passionate about. So that is a risk, and it is something I think they'd have to balance very, very carefully. So to sort of summarise my last points, I really do think RGG could make a good Shenmue game. I really do. They're a talented studio, have got a history of churning out banger after banger after banger. They are fantastic at what they do, and I would really be on board with them taking on Shenmue. That said, I'd like Yu Suzuki to be involved with this as much as possible if it were to happen, because he has all the scripts, he has the idea of the Shenmue world, and he knows what the community would want, and then they'd be able to balance that out with the modern sensibilities around world building, characters, story, sounds, etc., and we don't lose that Shenmue feel. It is very much a tough balancing act here, but one I think that they could do really well with. So guys, to round this video off, do you think RGG could do a good job with Shenmue? What would you like to see them do with Shenmue 4, if anything at all? What are your thoughts, feelings on the matter? Drop us a comment in the YouTube comments below. Give us a like, share, subscribe on the usual channels, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch. We're everywhere. You know exactly where we can find us, guys. But for now, guys, thank you for dropping in with the content as always. And I'll be back with another video not too far from now. Take care. Have a good one.